Good evening, everybody. It is 6:04 p.m. on October 7th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is Amelia Aboff, Jahan Habib, Rob Buchanan, Aaron Gino, and Debbie Howard Easton. And we have a number of items on our agenda this evening. The first is the first two are continuations of public hearings that have previously been opened at 111 South Street and 121 South Street. We will also have a continuation of an application that was opened but has been subsequently continued and no presentation has since been made on 73 Summer Street. We will also have an opening of the hearing on 872 Broadway. And we're also going to have a discussion on Summer Vision 2020. So before we get started on our meeting this evening, two things actually. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. An audio recording of these proceedings will be available upon request to planning@somervillema.gov. This meeting is being recorded. I would like to ask the clerk of the planning board to read into the record the notice of public hearing for 872 Broadway, please.
Yes, case 872 Broadway, P&Z 20-026. 872 Broadway LLC proposes to construct a 3-story net zero ready general building in the MR3 district, which requires site plan approval.
Thank you, Rob, very much. It is the discretion of the chair to take certain items out of order, so I'd like to ask Victor Nascimento to do a presentation on Summer Vision. And just so the planning board is aware of 2040 Summer Vision's plan, the city council has already voted to endorse the plan. That is not their responsibility under state law. It is our responsibility under state law to adopt the plan, and it's discretionary for the city council to endorse it, which does nothing except the fact that they like our endorsement and our approval. But just so everybody's aware that the city council has already signified their full kind of thumbs up for the plan, and we have currently this might be our 4th time. Amelia might know more because she was pretty significantly involved with the creation and the drafting of the plan. This is maybe our 4th time hearing different tweaks to it since it was drafted. Is that right?
I'll have to defer to Victor. This is either the 3rd or the 4th time, I believe.
Right. It's certainly not something that is new to the planning board. It's something that we've heard several times before as a presentation by staff and have had some discussion among all of us. So this is what I expect to be the last evening that we'll have a presentation by staff before the planning board is ready to take a vote on approval of the 2040 iteration of the Summer Vision plan. So I'd like to ask Victor to make a presentation, hopefully speaking to the changes that were made since the last time that we heard this presentation, but if he has a broader one in mind, we're welcome to hear that as well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Victor Nascimento. I'm a planner and outreach coordinator with the Planning and Zoning Division, and I have been involved in the Summer Vision comprehensive plan process since the beginning. So let me share my screen here. Can everyone see that okay? Awesome. Okay, so the the structure of the presentation today is I'm going to give you a quick summary of what Summer Vision is all about, just for the folks that haven't heard about it in a little while. But I'll try to keep that not too long. And then after that, I'll focus mainly on the changes that have been made since the last public hearing and public presentation to both the council and the board. And then I will open it up for any questions that you might have. So what is a comprehensive plan? The purposes of it is to establish a broad community vision, particularly focuses on values and goals, and to provide a list of policy ideas that could address those key challenges. And this helps frame future neighborhood plans and other SBCD efforts. It's key to note that it is not an ordinance or an implementation document, and that the individual policies listed in Summer Vision, for the most part, deserve to have their own public processes through the implementation phase. The community outreach and engagement process for Summer Vision 2040 really was the plan itself. This was a document written by community members, and outreach process was integral to the entire creation of it. One key strategy that we adopted was on creating a lot of different spaces of how folks could provide feedback and participate. People were comfortable with different kinds of settings. And so we had a Summer Vision card game, which was basically a detailed survey that we disguised as a game to make it more interesting. And we took that to community events all over the city, and we made sure that geographically we covered as much of the city as possible. And over 400 individuals participated. We had more traditional public hearings and meetings that were open to all community members. We did something called the Summer Suppers, where we basically provided a package that allowed community members to organize their own dinner parties so that they could have these conversations without city staff present, and then write down their thoughts and report back to us. We also offered through online engagement surveys and the ability for folks to tell their stories and how they apply to the context of the document. And lastly, we had the Summer Vision forums, which were really key to target communities that we don't often hear enough of and from. This included teenagers, folks who don't speak English, and so we had forums exclusively in other languages. We also went to some elderly homes to talk to folks who have mobility issues and otherwise can't make it to regular meetings, as well as to folks with disabilities or other limitations that may prevent them from participating in other means. These are some pictures from our community engagement process. These are all from the card game. At the end of playing, we had folks take a picture. And so we have a few hundred of these. These are some images from the Summer Vision Committee. A little background on that. The Summer Vision Committee had almost 60 members. They were a diverse crowd in terms of both ethnic background, interest, age, as well as professional experience. As part of the Summer Vision Committee, we also formed a smaller equity advisement committee that was composed of folks who have an experience working on social justice issues, so that they could advise other working groups on how to integrate equity into their topic chapters. I also ran 2 different workshops to create kind of a shared framework on how we would talk and integrate equity into the work. Some of the key themes that came out of Summer Vision 2040 included the application of an equity lens to all the work that we do. This has been an ongoing effort in the city, but we really wanted to codify that and push it forward in a more aggressive way. We considered the importance of equity in each of the topic chapters, and the topic chapters were organized around topics rather than demographic specific impact analysis, but we wanted to make sure that that was part of the conversation, that it set the foundation for additional future studies in how different groups in the community are impacted by different issues. Another key theme was minimizing displacement. There were many conversations, and it's a key focus on the document, much more emphasized than in Summer Vision 2030, about the high risk of displacement on both residents and also small businesses, and how that could negatively impact diversity in our community. This is a list of values. They are for the most part similar to 2030. The 2 big differences we made are a reflection of changes in our community. Is talking about protecting and fostering diversity, well, before we talked about celebrating it. This may seem like a small change, but it's a recognition that diversity is not something that we should just value, but that it needs to be actively protected and fostered through inclusionary policies. Now I'll just give a few key highlights on some of the topic chapters before going to the next section. For housing, the number was changed to reaching a 20% permanently affordable housing stock for the community, as opposed to setting hard goals for the number of units we should be built. This is in recognizing that the ultimate goal is to improve affordability, and while creating new housing is a way to do that, there are other paths as well. And we talked about establishing a task force with sufficient resources and expertise to find ways to get us to this target of affordable housing, as well as setting the foundation for working new zoning amendments that will continue to support this effort. And some of this effort has already been underway with the new division in OSBCD addressing housing access. Climate and sustainability was another really key chapter, considering the urgency of climate change. The goal of decreasing carbon emissions by 80% by 2040 is an ambitious one, but one the community widely supports. A few more highlights in mobility. The key focus was on talking about reducing the amount of vehicle miles traveled, and a lot of the ideas are centered around how we can get that. In terms of infrastructure, a lot of conversations are about building resiliency into our water and sewage systems. This is also in part a reflection of the increased threat of rainstorms through climate change. Commercial development, a lot of the focus was on zoning amendments that would help support commercial development, particularly for small and independent businesses. In education, we talked a lot about ensuring that our schools are true community schools that have integrated services that aren't just academic, but also health and social services oriented. In open space, we talked about an acquisition strategy. We maintained the same ambitious goal as Summer Vision 2030 to add, at the time it was 120, but now it's 105, since some of that work has already been done in terms of new acres of open space. And in community and governance, we focused a lot on talking about incorporating equity goals into our neighborhood plans and our overall public processes. So that's the end of the summary section of what has already happened. So here's where we are now. The draft of Summer Vision 2040 was released at the end of 2019. We received extensive feedback during the open comment period after those presentations. We held a public hearing. In the spring of 2020, we had to put this process on hold, primarily because too many resources were being focused on COVID. In the winter of 2020, we went back and incorporated all of the community feedback we had received, and we reconvened the Summer Vision Committee to approve all of those edits. And then just last week, we received an endorsement by the City Council, and we're now seeking the approval and adoption by the Planning Board. So see, here's what's changed basically since the last major presentations. We added a new page spread called An Unprecedented Year to discuss the Summer Vision within the context of COVID and the things that COVID highlighted. We didn't find that the main themes of the document were changed during COVID, but rather that the same existing issues were just exacerbated at a time of crisis. And that raised the urgency with which we need to address them. We also added a new spread called Implementation One Step at a Time. This was really to highlight that Summer Vision is the beginning of the process, that additional work needs to be done with the community, the City Council, the mayor and the city staff, boards and committees like the Planning Board, as well as partnerships with nonprofits to further analyze, study, and figure our implementation paths for all the policy proposals in the vision plan. Now, for the last thing, I'll go over some of the key edits that we made. We've added a sidebar about the Racial and Social Justice Department that was added into SPCD. We added a new climate and sustainability task about evaluating waste streams. We added several new commercial development tasks related to shared use, commercial space affordability, and small business support. We added a sidebar about indoor community space needs in the community, an explanation about mobility hubs, a go about expanding off-street walking paths, a new sidebar explaining shared streets, and another one explaining the importance of pollinators. Another one explaining universal design in housing, an additional one explaining the benefits of worker co-ops. We added income inequality measured by the Gini coefficient as an indicator in the economic and commercial development chapter. We streamlined the vocabulary in the document to seniors versus using many other terms like elderly and older adults. And we added grow older to the sort of theme statement of live, work, play, and raise a family. We emphasize that the threat of displacement is particularly strong for residents who are both low and fixed income. We had a new sidebar about the digital divide, another one about the city joined the ARP age-friendly cities. We had a new task about improving communication platforms accessibility to various users. Another one expanding on senior-specific housing needs. We added a new task for adding more seating and lighting to improve walking accessibility in sidewalks. We emphasized that seating is an open space equity goal. And we changed the youth and education chapter title to education. This was not a change in the content of the chapter, but rather a clarifying change that all of our chapters are focused on policy-related issues and not meant to dive deep into the experiences of specific demographics of our community. That's it for the presentation. SummerVision2040.com is where you can find the complete document, as well as a ton of information about how we put it together and constructed it.
Victor, thank you very much. That's really helpful to see where it is now from where we have been the last several times that the presentation has been made to this board and to the public. I think it's a lot more cohesive. I think it makes the plan something that we should all be proud of, and something to which we should aspire. And I'm hoping we can get a consensus of the planning board this evening to move it forward for approval, and bearing in mind that this is a guiding document that spells out our goals and aspirations, and it's not holding any particular application to any particular set of standards, but it is speaking to our values as a community, as a city, and what we want to see from development and coordination between the city and developers and other stakeholders. So I'd like to open it up for discussion for members of the planning board who may not have already weighed in on what I think is a really, really strong addition and I guess modification to the original summer vision plan that we've had. So I know Amelia worked hard on this for a number of years as one of the as our designee to the Summer Vision 2040 committee, and so I'd like to ask her to say one or two quick things, or more if she'd like, just because I know this was kind of your project that you worked quite hard on for a long time, and I'm sure you're proud of it, and you should be.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to give an incredible amount of thanks to the staff who have worked to put this together. I think that Victor's sort of explanation of the process was intended to keep this meeting moving along, but certainly it is difficult to overstate, I think, the amount of engagement that the city team really looked to solicit in a variety of different ways to make sure that this document was going to be representative of not only the views of the sort of self-selected group who formed the Summer Vision Committee, but also the community more broadly, and really made an impressive effort to get out into the community and get that, that feedback from every corner. So I'm grateful for their incredible work and for the work of the chairs in sort of leading us through further iterations of this, because I know we also thought that this was done and ready to go some time ago, and certainly COVID taught us a lot of new information about how the city functions and about the support systems that sort of do and don't work in their current iterations. And I think the staff has done an amazing job of folding in that new learning into the recommendations that are in the plan draft to date. And as much as I would have loved to have this document finalized and approved, 18 months ago. I think that it's a stronger, more forward-looking document for the inputs that have been added in this last year and a half as we've come through the other side of the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to having this finalized, and I think it sets all of the right goals and standards that we try to espouse as a community. And thank you again to the incredible team who has been sort of driving this the whole time.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you very much, Amelia. I already said my 2 seconds, and I'll reiterate that I think it's an incredibly strong presentation. I think it's an incredibly strong plan. It should be voted on by the board this evening to approve the plan so that it can be the master plan and of the city and the guided document that does everything, or at least informs everything that we do for the next several decades. I think it's incredibly valuable, and I would hope that we could vote to approve it this evening. If anybody else has any other questions or comments on the presentation, I would welcome you all to raise your hand and be heard. No? Okay. Seeing none, what I'd like to do is go a little bit out of order and ask Amelia to move to approve it, as she was the one who was most hands-on in its drafting.
Sure. So move to adopt the Summer Vision 2040 plan in its latest iteration as presented this evening.
Thank you very much. Seconded by myself. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
John votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye enthusiastically.
Debbie votes aye. Congratulations.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much. We have
I've been alerted that since I was put on the spot and I'm not usually the person making the motion, that we actually need to adopt it, not approve it. So we may need to do this one more time. I do apologize. With the same excitement, moving to adopt the Summer Vision 2040 plan.
enthusiastically seconded by myself. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
John votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
And Debbie votes aye.
We have a plan. Congratulations, everyone. Congratulations, Victor, and congratulations, Amelia, for your hard work in getting this done. Next up, what I'd like to do is open the, well, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to do South Street last because Amelia is going to have to recuse herself and I don't want her to leave and come back. Let's do 73 Summer Street because they have been previously opened and continued since September, and I'd like to be able to hear that applicant as soon as we can. So if the applicant or applicant's representative could be unmuted and any presentation that they want to make be shared.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca Cooper speaking. Team, if you could raise your hands, please, so that I can unmute you, I'd appreciate that.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, there we go.
This is Nick Oganowski from Trax Development. Thanks for having us on tonight, everybody. Can you see me, or should we just upload the presentation?
If you designate the person whose screen you would like to share, I will make them a presenter so that they can share their screen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be me, Ryan Sprague with Embark.
Okay, hang on just a second, Ryan.
And I'll just kind of give a brief introduction before I hand it off to Ryan. But
Hold on for just one quick second. This is Rebecca speaking, and I would just like to take the opportunity of my forgetting to do so. Please ask that for the record, since this will be kept as an audio file, please everybody announce yourself and give your name before you begin speaking. Thanks so much.
So this is Nick Oganowski of Trax Development. And I have here with me Ryan Speaker, also of Trax Development, Ryan Noon and Ryan Sprague, both of Embark, and Jeffrey Dirk of Vanessa and Associates, our traffic engineer, and Natalie Adams of Verdant Landscape Architects. So just to set the stage, this is about a 14,000 square foot site at the corner of School Street and Summer Street in Spring Hill. We're proposing a 27 unit building with 18 parking spaces that fits right in with Somerville's new zoning that was adopted in 2019. So far, we've had our design review recommendation from the Urban Design Commission. We've had a bunch of neighborhood meetings with Councilor Benyu Campen, and we've had great feedback from that. We've also had our mobility management plan decision from the mobility division. So we've gone through all of these processes so far, and it's really made the project quite a strong one, in our opinion. And now we're seeking site plan approval and a special permit from you tonight at the planning board. So with that, I've got to ask, can Ryan Noon and Natalie Adams please be unmuted?
This is Rebecca Cooper speaking. I believe that both are currently unmuted.
Okay. This is Nick Oganowski again. I'm just going to hand it off to Ryan Sprague of Embark.
Great. Yep, this is Ryan Sprague. I am with Embark. I am one of the designers on this project. I will take you through these first couple slides, and then I'll pass it off to Natalie with Verdant, who worked on the landscape drawings for us. So just a little bit of context that sort of clued us into our strategy for this project, just sort of understanding the surrounding zoning. So we're there at the corner of Summer and School Street. We're a MR3 mid-rise zoned parcel, sort of surrounded by other MR3 and urban residential parcel types, with a little bit of exposure to these smaller scale neighborhood residential parcel types immediately across School Street. Just a little bit of context, kind of looking at the some of the structures in the immediate vicinity. So starting sort of just to the right of our site map here, looking at some of those 2.5-story neighborhood residential pitched roof structures, then moving clockwise, standing on School Street, sort of looking back at the site across Summer Street at some of those 3-story residential buildings. And then standing on Summer Street, looking back at the site, how it formerly looked with the dilapidated gas station and canopy. And then lastly, our direct abutters to the north and west are these 2.5-story brick buildings with various brick detailing and masonry. And then just quickly going through our zoning requirements and our state of compliance with those. Again, we're an MR3 mid-rise. We're proposing an apartment building on a lot that's approximately 14,600 square feet in size. And then just going through each item quickly, we're at 3 stories proposed and just under 38 feet tall. We do have 2 front yard requirements by virtue of the fact that we're located on a street corner. So our primary front yard is going to be along Summer Street, where we've located both our vehicular and pedestrian entry to the building, with our secondary front yard being along School Street. So we're pushed back 4'6" and 4'4" respectively, which both yield 12-foot wide sidewalks. Our side yards are at 3.5 feet and 5 feet. And then we're coming in around 10% smaller than required for our lot coverage. As Nick mentioned, we're at 27 dwelling units proposed. Our open space is 17.4% relative to the lot area. And the green score, which Natalie will take you through, we're at 0.27 ratio relative to a 0.25 ratio required. And by virtue of the fact that we are located within a transit overlay district, we actually have a parking maximum and not a parking minimum. So we're at 18 spaces, whereas the required is, or the allowable, I should say, is one per unit. So that would be 27 spaces. And with that, I'll turn it over to Natalie to take you through these next few slides.
Great, thank you. Good evening, members of the board. I'm Natalie Adams with Verdant Landscape Architecture. We're looking at L1, which is our landscape site plan. And I'm going to start at the lobby entry, which is on Summer Street. Thank you. And you'll notice pervious pavers set in a welcoming herringbone pattern. I don't think you can grasp that at this scale, but it's there. And please note that these pavers continue around the building. You'll notice that purple tone all the way around the building. Also note to the right of the lobby entry is a drifter. It's an edgy drifter bench, and we'll see a picture. Oh, there's a picture of that right there on the right. And we also have a proposed street tree right there and 2 bike racks, which parks 4 bikes beside the street tree. Now let's go around to the bike park, what we're calling the bike park to the rear. And let's see, this is the School Street Bike Park, is 15 feet by 31 feet. And there's 2 bike racks. There's Somerville approved bike racks and a Fix-It bike repair station. And then also here is another one of those edgy drifter benches by Street Life. And we have pervious pavers here as well. And I think for planting, our real big gift, I mean, really, is this beautiful American sycamore tree that we're proposing to put in here. And we have a nice mix of shrubs and perennials. This will be maintaining a transparency, but with a bit of a buffer to soften, the harder edges of the architecture. Now, just to mention the amenity courtyard right adjacent to the bike park. You'll note the side yard, we have an ADA ramp leading up to the structure. Thank you. And on the amenity deck, we have pedestal wood tile pavers. We have an intensive planting on the deck, which is shrubs and perennials. And the soil depth here is anywhere between 12 and 24 inches. So it's an intensive plant bed. And the wall we are showing to hold this up is a board formed concrete wall. It adds a nice texture and scale to the landscape. And we have a black metal safety guardrail or a cable fence for the fall height safety. And this also, again, adds to that transparency to the buffer. Let's see now. Oh, and I also wanted to note before we went on to the next page that the Spring Hill Sewer Separation Project area improvements is going to give a really nice buffer right there on School Street, and they'll be able to put some trees in here. So that's really outside of our project area, but I just wanted to note it. And if you would go on to L2, please. Okay, so here's the landscape planting plan, and you'll note we have a tree mitigation. We're planting 6 new trees on this site. There's the American sycamore I mentioned just previous, and we have 6 pin oaks, which are beside the drive, the entry into the garage. There are the 6 pin oaks, and let's see, let me just turn the page to my notes. And I'm happy to answer any questions about our planting plan. It went through green score, which means we have all native plant materials, and the site's very well planted. To go on to L3, this is our green score calculations, and as mentioned earlier, we got a 0.27 green score where 0.25 is minimum. And if anybody wants me to walk them through that, I can, but I'm going to go on to L4, which is our depaving plan. And this graphically depicts this area once almost fully paved. And the areas you note that are toned will be pervious paving or plant bed. and the total square footage is 1,365. And the last page that I will present tonight is the next page is LD1, and these were our required landscape details to support the green score. And that's our landscape presentation tonight. I'll be happy to answer questions when the time comes. Thank you.
And then I think Ryan Noon is going to pick up here and kind of walk through the plans. Ryan, are you on the line here?
This is Rebecca speaking. Ryan, you are unmuted on this end and the line shows as clear. It might be that you're having an issue with volume.
I can probably take us through, and if I miss anything and Ryan gets on and gets his stuff figured out, then he can sort of add to what I've said. I worked a little bit on this site layout and lighting plan. I know that we worked with consultants on this to sort of make sure that we were sort of adhering to some of the standards with regard to light pollution and such. But I'll start with the basement level plan and just go through parking. So as I mentioned, we are locating both our vehicular and pedestrian entry off of Summer Street. So our vehicular entry, you can see over here to the sort of page left, gets us access to those 18 parking spots that I mentioned previously, 7 of which would be EV capable. We are also showing bike storage for 56 bikes here kind of next to that drive aisle, as well as, taking into account people who may be working from home in our sort of current situations, this work from home hub that we've proposed. And by virtue of the fact that we've actually lifted the first level up 6 feet from average grade, which, I'll show you here in a second, we are actually able to kind of line this corner with windows to allow for some natural light to sort of filter down into those spaces. Moving up, sorry, I apologize. Moving up to our first level floor plan, lobby is located here at approximately grade 0. And then sort of transitioning from the lobby to the first level, you would sort of take a half stop up this lift or the stair to get to our first residential floor. At the first level, we do have 9 residential units, which consist of a mix of studio 1 beds and 2 beds. And then you can sort of see here the amenity courtyard that Natalie was referring to earlier, with access to that off of this ADA ramp, which also sort of presents our second accessible means. Moving up to the second level, we have a really similar layout here. Again, 9 units. With a mix of studios, 1 beds and 2 beds. And then sort of the same idea on the third floor, with the exception being we are presenting these or proposing these balconies off of 3 of the units at the third floor, which you'll see a little more clearly in our elevations. Moving up to the roof plan, showing all of our mechanical. So in the elevations, you'll see sort of how we're proposing to screen the mechanical there, our elevator overrun, as well as Ryan and probably Nick will be able to speak maybe better to sort of this area that we're sort of holding for potential photovoltaics. And then just moving into our elevations. So top graphic there is our Summer Street elevation. And I think here you can, fairly clearly see our strategy for breaking up the facade into sort of distinct volumes. So per zoning, we're required to break up any facade that's longer than 100 feet into distinct facade strategies. So kind of the idea here was to, with this brick volume, was to sort of bring in some of the contextual material and facade composition to try to integrate the project into its surroundings, while also, simultaneously trying to frame this more modern corner volume that's, fairly visible there at the corner of School and Summer Street. You can see, more easily here, the first level that I mentioned lifted 6 feet from average grade. The reason we push it up so far is you can see kind of the natural slope of the site, and this elevation for our first level kind of yields these sill heights at the highest portion of the site that are still clear of the eye elevation. So you're still providing some privacy for the inhabitants and encouraging the use of those windows for things like daylighting and ventilation. Moving around to the School Street elevation, up School Street is that amenity courtyard and neighborhood respite that Natalie was talking about, with seating elements as well as bike parking elements and a bike fix-it station, as well as the entry to that ADA ramp. And then turning the corner onto this north elevation where we sort of transition into maybe a more economical kind of facade strategy that transitions into this fiber cement clapboard material that then turns the corner to the west elevation and kind of continues along that west facade, where we've sort of adopted the same strategy where we're trying to break that facade up into two different distinct strategies for skinning it. One of the things that you're not seeing here in this elevation is our proposal for a wood slat screening element that should hide that garage entry as well as the transformer there. Moving into the interior amenity courtyard. So I'll kind of zoom in here to show you the key plan. Starting with this elevation 1 is kind of this knuckle that you can't really see from the street all that well. It is a continuation of that modern strategy with this high density fiber cement and wood combination. You can see also that our strategy for mechanical screening is again this wood slat screening. That second elevation there, as you can see, is kind of looking back towards the School Street, where we're adopting again this. It's a continuation of that brick strategy with more traditional windows and brick detailing. And then lastly, the northern facing courtyard facade is again, we're kind of picking up on that modern facade strategy. Quickly to talk about the entry design. So starting with the lower graphic, our overall entry expression is approximately 17.5 feet in width, with the recessed portion of that entry being 13 feet in width. And then zooming in to the signage detail. So per zoning code, we're only allowed to be 12 inches tall with our address signage. And we're proposing to hang that from this canopy that sort of projects out over the entryway. And zooming in just a little bit further, giving you more detail on that and what that signage might be. We're proposing a powder-coated aluminum frame that it is let's see, 100. Oh, sorry, an 1.5 inches thick. That has this cavity that's enclosed by this frosted glass, and within that cavity, this integrated light source that then sort of lights up these numbers. So you have this glowing 73 that is visible from both front and back. And then finally, just our 3 perspectives to give you a better idea of what the sort of 3-dimensional quality of the project is. So starting with this first perspective, looking at the project from the corner of School and Summer Street, you can see that more modern volume at the corner and the more traditionally detailed pieces sort of flanking it. Then moving over, looking at from across School Street back at the amenity courtyard in this neighborhood respite with that big tree kind of screening and providing a little bit of privacy for the activity beyond. And then lastly, looking back towards the street corner from Summer Street, you can see the entry to the garage here, as well as that screening element that I had mentioned earlier, sort of screening off the transformer and the entry to parking. And with that, I don't know if Ryan Noon is back on and wanted to add anything that I had to say about the plans. And if
I'm
not,
back on, I think. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Sorry about that, Ryan. Thanks for covering me. I actually, thank you. I have nothing to add with respect to the plans, but certainly here to help field any questions now that you made your way through the presentation. So sorry about that again, everybody.
Sorry, yeah, and just to clarify, that's our final slide there, and we're good to field questions if anyone has them.
Okay, so I will reserve my comments and questions for a few minutes until I hear from my colleagues and from the public from public testimony that I will open up after comments from the planning board. So I would welcome any of my colleagues that would like to ask questions or make comments on this application to do it now, or you can reserve until after we've heard public testimony like I intend to do. Seeing none at this time, what I'd like to do is open it up to public testimony. I want to thank the applicant for their presentation. And for any person in the audience, the electronic audience and the virtual audience that wants to speak in support of this application, I ask you to exercise your raised hand. I do want, before we open it up to public testimony, I want to make note that we have received a written letter from Councilor Ewan Campen in regards to this application, and it is, Rebecca, that is part of the public record, right, already?
This is Rebecca speaking. Yes, Mr. Chair, that is part of the public record.
And I will just summarize the councilor's comments. He said that the neighborhood and he were supportive generally of the application, but wanted, as I recall, to make particular note and seek certain conditions regarding noise and construction times to minimize the disruption to the neighborhood, which is obviously something that I would agree with and something that I would support. So I would ask anybody from the public who wants to speak in support of the application to raise their hand, and I will call on you in the order in which I see you.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca. If I might just quickly, I wanted to speak to everybody. If you're not familiar with the procedure for public comment, you can look at the panel where your name is. There's a column immediately to the left of your name, and if you click in that column, you will be raising your hand, and we will call on you to be able to speak.
Thanks, Rebecca. I note that Nick Oganowski has his hand raised, but I also know that he's part of the development team. So I'm scouring the list now, and I do not see any hands raised.
This is Rebecca speaking, Mr. Chair. I agree. There is no further hand raised.
Thank you. I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing, and I'm going to open it up to anyone in the audience that wants to speak in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern. Please exercise the raised hand function. Going once. I see Meredith Porter. So if Mr. Porter could please be unmuted.
This is Rebecca speaking. Meredith, you are now unmuted.
Okay, Meredith Porter, 104 Josephine Ave. This is not so much a comment on this specific project, although it is. It's a question of notice here, which I'm concerned about. It's been a general problem. So section 15.1.7.d of the new zoning ordinance, which is on page 536, has requirements for posted notice. One of those is applicants shall post notice of a development review public hearing in a conspicuous place at the subject property at least 14 days in advance of the scheduled meeting date. The applicants have not done that for this project. I will say that other applicants have not been doing that either. And the same section provides for the Director of Planning and Zoning to post notice of meetings at City Hall, and that has not been observed either. So I would just ask that those conditions please be observed, at least in the future. It means that the lack of following those conditions means that people may not attend the meetings who otherwise would. And I would say that looking at the notes of the neighborhood meetings, there's a list of attendees, and I find that to be inadequate. The attendees are shown as various officials and people in the process. So in other words, Somerville City Councilor, Planning and Zoning, and so on. And then it merely says local abutters. So there's no way to tell how many local abutters or other people who might not have been abutters, but who may have been interested parties in the city attended the meeting. And that is, it has been a problem in the past that people were not aware of development. And I will also comment that this meeting has been delayed for a long, long time. It's been continued one meeting after another, which makes it difficult for people to attend. So mostly those are concerns, ongoing concerns that I'd like to see attended to. Thanks for that, for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Is there anybody else that wants to speak in opposition or express concern about this application? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing. And before we move forward with comments and questions from the board, I would ask Rebecca to address the issue regarding Mr. Porter's concern on notice. It would not surprise me that notice being made at City Hall might be something that has been waived because City Hall has been closed due to a public health crisis for the last 18 months. But I would like to hear your response to that, because that is something that, you know, is obviously concerning and could be a violation of the law.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Thank you for the question. I, of course, can't speak for the applicant in terms of notice on the site. I do know that as a general item, planning and zoning staff has not been enforcing that. It is a requirement on the part. It's not something the planning and zoning staff enforces. It is on the part of the applicant to comply with. I will say that, as you noted, the City Hall, as with many, if not all, city buildings have been closed, either closed completely for the past 18 to 19 months, or are open by appointment only, as City Hall is currently. That said, I know that staff is diligent about making sure that legal notices are sent out in a timely manner. We have occasionally noticed that we've made some errors and have either withdrawn or re-noticed those cases. City staff, planning staff is diligent also about providing appropriate notices to the city clerk. Unfortunately, we do not have control over the city clerk's practices and whether those notices get posted and whether once they're posted to the notice board, they are taken down or moved by someone else. However, city planning staff are, we have a double check system where we make sure that notices are posted on the city calendar, electronic calendar, in order to make sure that cases are noticed properly. Regarding the continuances, this is something that is occasionally necessary. Sometimes a legally noticed case will discover that there's an issue that needs to be resolved, as in the case of this particular application. And they were not ready to come before the board because due to that error, they did not have a full and complete application. And so it is their right to request such a continuance. It is the board's purview to accept or not that continuance in each case that has been done, and the case has been moved to the next appropriate agenda item, which has also been put online. I will note that planning staff are currently working with the clerk's office on making sure that items are properly located on the website for the city calendar, but we will follow up on that. We'll check on that and follow up.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I appreciate your comments on the procedural issues that Mr. Porter raised, and to the extent that they can be perfected, I think we would all appreciate that. I would invite my planning board colleagues to make any comments or ask any questions of this applicant at this time, and I'll call on you to do that if you so choose. I know I have certain comments and questions. I see Debbie first, so I'm going to ask Debbie to be recognized and ask her questions and make her comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First off, just to follow up on the notice issue, I know if our new zoning code requires applicants to post at the property, just a general question on what department is going to be enforcing that's actually happening or not. Just as a general comment. Second, particular to this building, I had two questions. One, if there's any proposals regarding sort of Amazon type deliveries, if they're going to be pulling into the driveway to do drop-offs or just kind of stopping along Summer or School Street. And the second question is around, I did try to get through the traffic study, although I know it's pretty voluminous, but if folks looked at, which I assume they did, but any issue with the street tree that's in front of the lobby and visibility issues coming out of the driveway there, because I know Summer Street is a heavily pedestrian and bike traveled street.
Thanks, Debbie. Those are two good questions. This is Ryan Noon again with Embark. So I can certainly speak to the Amazon delivery. So we haven't made any provisions for a loading zone or anything like that. So at this time, we'd envision any package deliveries being done off the side of the street, off of Summer Street. They, in theory, could certainly pull to the first half of the ramp, really before the ramp starts to go down into the garage. However, if someone was trying to come up the other way, there could be an issue there. So I think at this time, our vision is that all packages would be delivered just by pulling over on the side of Summer Street. And then in terms of the street tree, I think that maybe Natalie can speak better to that. And again, the street trees that we show on this plan, we took the Spring Hill future plans and we kind of overlaid them with our site. So the street trees that we propose, I believe would be executed at a later date is the way that we see this going. And I think we then have the opportunity to be selective as to what type of tree, what height ultimately, and its exact placement as to not interfere with traffic visibility across the intersection, which is certainly something, it was a concern from the get-go with this project, and we may have touched on it, but simple moves in the massing that cater to this traffic visibility across the corners. For instance, we chamfered the ground floor of this building to really cater to the traffic visibility across Summer Street and School Street. So certainly something that's on our mind. And I think that, Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, but that street tree specific to the left of the lobby, if you're looking at the building, that will be planted as part of this whole improvement project. Is that correct?
Yes, this is Natalie Adams of Verdant Landscape Architecture. That is correct, Ryan. This is it's part of the proposal, but it could be flexible. The standard that we go by is 15 feet away from driveways. That gives you a clear cone of vision. Now, I know my daughter lives in Somerville, and I know how busy it is. And if you don't want a street tree there, then we could certainly do something different with a ground cover or something like that. We're certainly willing to adjust to whatever the needs of the community are. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking.
Hi, Rebecca. I know you want to address a few things.
I do want to make two entries here. The first is I have noticed that there are some members of the public putting comments in the chat feature. I will note that those are not part of the public hearing. Staff is not consulting them, and they will not be made a part of the hearing. The public hearing for this project was open and closed and can't be opened again unless there's new material brought before the planning board. You are, of course, welcome to submit a written comment to planning@somervillema.gov. That's planning@somervillema.gov. And I'm sure that as long as it's received by the deadline that the chair will give, it will be forwarded along to the board promptly. I did want to also address through you, Ms. Howard Easton's question about enforcement. Planning staff would very much like to be able to monitor that, but so there's two challenges during the pandemic times. The first is that the signs that we used to print up were frequently not returned, or were stolen from the site, or were damaged in such a way that they couldn't be used again. So we haven't been enforcing that, and we've been trying to make up the difference with online notices.
Thanks very much, Rebecca. And I do want to make a note for anybody in the public that has not made oral testimony this evening, because that time has passed. I will be extending testimony in a written form to planning@somervillema.gov to Friday the 15th at noon. It's the practice of the planning board to leave written comment open until noon of the Friday preceding our next regularly scheduled meeting, and that would be the 15th at noon. So anyone that has not been heard this evening that wants to make their public testimony known, I would invite you to direct your testimony to the email address by Friday the 15th at noon, and the planning board will take it under consideration prior to our next meeting on the 21st. So does anyone else? I see Rob's hand raised, so I saw Rob and I saw Aaron, but I saw Rob first. I'm sorry. And Amelia. Okay. It's whack-a-mole tonight. That's cool. I'm going to take Rob first since I saw you first.
Okay, and I'll try to be crisp.
I would say this. I invite crispness. The Red Sox play at 8:30.
I have 6 questions. The first question follows on Debbie's comment with respect to street trees on Summer Street. I had been wondering whether there had been consideration of actually more than one street tree on Summer Street, in part because we have so few of them in the city, and I know that that's a priority. And I think if we, use the 15-foot rule of thumb away from roads and driveways, we may not have any street trees. So I guess that's one question on the landscaping, and I'll finish my other. And my other question on the landscaping was, with respect to the transformer that's shown there on the bottom left, is that the transformer that we're seeing, or is that some type of a screening element? And I ask because on the landscape design, I thought I understood that there's some type of, green element there to help provide that some sort of a buffer, but I just wasn't clear what was happening there. So those are my first two questions. Shall I pause there?
Yeah, this is Natalie Adams. If who's in charge of the presentation can go back to the landscape plan. I think it's on like page 5 or 6. We do have some green elements there. We also have some pervious paving in front of the transformer. I'm going to let the architects speak about the transformer specifically, but here we go. We're catching up with the presentation right now. I believe there was some low, oh no, that must have been in times past. So what we have right there is pea gravel surrounded the transformer, and that's for infiltration, and then the pervious pavers also for infiltration, and then behind them are the 5 horn beams, and there's some ground cover under that. And if you wanted to drill down into specifics, we could go to the planting plan and look at that. It's up to you.
No, I guess the balance of my comment would be to consider either some sort of artistic treatment of the transformer or potentially some screening from the sidewalk would be.
Well, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, the transformers, I think, and the architects can forgive me if, please, you need 10 feet in front of the transformer to be available for the trucks to come up and service it, and then I think it's 4 feet on each side, on the 2 sides in the rear. And as for the street trees, as a landscape architect, I want to populate the world with more trees. And if you guys feel you would like another street tree on Summer Street, we'd be more than happy to oblige that. But again, the vision on the street and it being so busy, so we would ask, that it would be written that we were told to do this by the city. Thank you.
Thank you. My third question pertains to the, whoever is in control of the presentation could go back to the perspective drawings of the 3D of the exterior. That would be really helpful. I'll let the presentation catch up here, but with respect to the, thank you, the entry and exit to the garage, one question I had was, and I was reading through the design guidelines and the zoning, and the design guidelines suggest that where there are pilasters, that they continue down to meet the base of the building, which I will say it's a lovely, lovely design. It's one of the better ones I feel like that we've seen. So kudos to the team. But I was wondering, did you consider integrating those pilasters, those supports into the brick in some way so that it's part of the building? Or I guess a question is, what was the rationale for kind of just sort of like, they appear to be like naked concrete to my eyes.
You're suggesting kind of here where my cursor is that correct?
The 3 supports to the left of the entry of the garage.
Here. Yeah, it's a good question. I think that we were trying to kind of pick up on some of the kind of metal detailing that was happening at our canopies, and felt like for clearance purposes, trying to get masonry kind of all the way to the ground maybe interferes with clearances for things like the transformer and drive aisles. So it's it's definitely something that we had thought of, but from a practicality standpoint, felt like this sort of detailing just worked better for clearance purposes.
And also to add to that, Ryan, this is the other Ryan. I think when we did test this as these kind of masonry stilts, if you will, it actually made the building feel a little heavy. And so we thought by changing the materiality to something like metal panel that would pull off the dark tone that you see on the third story, it actually kind of alleviates this corner and makes it feel a little bit lighter rather than the masonry coming down and extending and hitting the groundscape. So we did study that. And we did note that section in the zoning ordinance, and you can see in other sections of the building itself, we do have that brick expression continue down as a column and hit the sidewalk and hit the base. So it's something we were cognizant of, but I think at the end of the day, it felt a little bit too like a brick mass and too heavy for us.
Okay, thank you. And my remaining questions pertain to the two-dimensional plans. Would you mind going to the plan of the basement? That would be helpful to explain my question. With respect to the work from home hub, it doesn't appear that there's any type of a lavatory or kitchenette, which is neither here nor there. But I guess the question I had was, does this count as livable space? I mean, is it in need of a second form of egress? I mean, maybe that's for the ISD to determine when they review the plan for building permit approval, but it did strike me as an unknown how comfortable this is as an actual work from home space without, a place to use the restroom or make a pot of coffee.
It's a good question, Rob. This is Ryan again with Embark. So just to speak to the code, just to hopefully get that out of the way. So we do have a code consultant on this job that's really helped us analyze these plans. So we do have, we meet the quote unquote common path of travel for egress separation. So we do have access to the two stairs. One is just outside the double door of said space. And those doors would never lock, so they'd be free swinging. And then the second means of egress, you'd have to discharge through the parking facility and go across the parking. You'd get to stair 2. So we do have 2 means of egress from the parking garage, and that's also not including the ramp, which I guess you could always use in an emergency, although we wouldn't condone it. And in terms of the program, this is left blank because frankly, we're still doing some programmatic studies with the development team as to how this is fit out. But we see this really as a business center kind of, if you need to do a call like this or something like that, rather than doing it from your unit, this is for the inhabitants of this building only. So we see this as maybe a small kitchenette. On the bathroom, it's something we spoke about, but doubtful because again, it's for the residents. So they would just elect to take the elevator or stairs up and use their restroom. So this is really going to be fit out probably with 1 or 2 smaller conference rooms and maybe more of a communal table or pool table or ping pong table or something like that. That would really cater to the building as an amenity. So and just to follow up on that, we did count this as habitable or livable square footage that counts towards the gross floor area of the building. As it's such an amenity to the building itself.
Thank you. That's exceptionally helpful clarification. My next question was pertaining to trash and recycling. I just want to confirm that, it is going to be housed in this kind of between floor room. And how will it be disposed of? Will your trash truck be going down into the garage and people taking it out, or will it be kind of wheeled up to the ground level and await pickup? How do you envision that happening?
So again, this is Ryan. So we're working with Trax on the logistics of this. As a management company, would very likely be taking over post-occupancy and really helping to deal with these issues. But the way we've spoken about this is, since the trash room is kind of at the lowest level of the basement, we positioned it such that it's accessible by the elevator and stair one. So residents would bring their trash down, and we'd have trash and recycling in this room, which, by the way, is going to be ventilated and conditioned so no odors get through the building. And then we envision this as trash cans would be brought up to street level by the management company at the day of trash and recycle pickup.
Okay, thank you. And my last question pertains to the next level up, the first floor. Thank you. So getting back to the discussion around Amazon deliveries and drop-offs, is the lobby going to be locked? And if so, did you consider an unlocked vestibule for, so that there is an interior location for the drop-off of packages and whatnot, so they're not kind of out on the sidewalk?
Great question. So Ryan again with Embark. So the lobby doors will be locked all the time as a safety precaution for the inhabitants of the building. They will be key fobbed, so everyone that lives there gets a fob. We have designed in an integrated video surveillance system. It's linked to each resident's entry, so they can basically see who's at the front door, buzz in the front door, and we can also we're working with a company called Butterfly MX. They create this software that is this basically this video and audio interface, and they have what's called an Amazon or package delivery feature. So you would actually be able to give the Amazon or delivery driver a PIN code that would allow them to get into the lobby so that they can put the box into our mail area that's designed in this project. So they'd have access to the lobby, and then the code basically obliterates, and they can never use that code again. So they couldn't get back in, a day later. So, but between those two, or really between that entry system and that package feature, we hope to utilize the lobby the way it is and keep the packages off the street. That's not our intention.
Thank you. I guess my last comment then on that is, I'm not sure I would be as trusting of my hardworking, quick, having to work under deadline Amazon drivers to remember to punch in a PIN code and get access. So maybe consideration of an unlocked vestibule or some other solution for the Amazon drop-offs is something to just consider and think about. But those are all my questions. Thank you, and thanks to my colleagues for bearing with me.
Thanks, Rob.
Sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. I should be better about this after 18 months, right? I remember seeing Erin and Amelia. Is that still accurate? Okay, I saw Erin first, so I'm going to ask Erin to ask her questions and make her comments.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll also be snappy. I have two precisely. One is around power lines, and this is more a clarification point. Am I correct in reading that the existing overhead power lines along Summer Street will be buried as part of this project, therefore like the whole transformer piece? And I know on the A303 perspective drawing, I saw a pole along Summer Street, or along School Street that terminated, and then the electrical line not continuing. Yeah, so in drawing 2 there, sort of to the right of that sycamore tree is the terminating power line. So I just wanted to make sure I'm reading the plans right, that there isn't expected to be power lines along this site on both School and Summer Street.
Thanks, Aaron, for the question. It's a good one, and Nick, slap me if I'm out of order here, but and also forgive the drawings if they don't read accurately. I know the perspectives can be tough with what we're trying to show architecturally and what's in the site, but My understanding is the power lines will actually remain in place above head, and they, I believe they go down Summer Street, and they're about the poles are about a foot off of the curb, the sidewalk curb, and they're overhead, and that's one of the reasons we set our building back such that our building facade will be about 10 feet away from the overhead power lines, which I believe is an OSHA requirement for framing to erect this building. So that's one reason why our building is pushed back along both facades, frankly. So Nick, jump in if I'm not accurate in that, but I believe our intent on at least on the architectural side is that the power lines do remain. The transformer that's on the plan is just to pull power from the pole to the transformer to step it down so it's a usable amperage for our building.
Yep, this is Nick. I completely agree, Ryan. I think you summed it up perfectly.
All right. And I guess going on that with the street tree, the only thing I would encourage you is when you work with the city, maybe try and choose a variety that isn't, maybe tall and pyramidal, that's going to grow straight into the power line. Because we often see these kind of like weirdly eye-shaped street trees that don't look as lovely or function as well as they maybe could.
Yeah, great comment and certainly noted.
Okay, great. And then the second thing is about the loading zone, which, a few of us have mentioned, but, the bike lane is along the building, along the project site on Summer Street. It is quite heavily trafficked. And as you guys know, that's the sort of lead up to a pretty grueling hill getting up Central Street. So I know it's just sort of a high likelihood of sort of a really dangerous kind of bike situation with Amazon trucks parking in that bike lane for maybe a long time while they sort out the key fob and vestibule situation. So, maybe some more thought on what that delivery situation looks like would be beneficial to not only cyclists, but also the residents. And then, again, for cyclist safety, I'm not sure if you guys have considered mirrors or some sort of visibility situation for exiting vehicles from the parking garage. I know that has been helpful, not only for me as a driver, but also me as a pedestrian to look and see if there are cars oncoming.
Yeah, so to address both of those questions, so to start with the ingress and egress at the vehicular ramp. So we will specify and often do in this occasion an audio and visual beacon. So when the garage doors open, whether someone's coming in or out, there'll be a flashing strobe and like a chirp. You've probably heard them on the sidewalk before, just to alert anyone that's within that crossing zone that someone will be coming up the ramp or going down the ramp to access the parking garage. So we're completely on board with that. And then just thinking out loud, Nick, jump in if you'd like, but I think we'd be open to potentially posting signage along Summer Street that suggests that any deliveries should be rerouted to School Street. And because of the Spring Hill Improvement Project, where there's that traffic mitigation bump out, where in this perspective on the screen now, on perspective number 1, you see that kind of thick foliage or shrubbery in the front there. So that is part of the Spring Hill Improvement Project, and it's to slow traffic down at this intersection. And by virtue of doing that, it creates kind of a natural pull-off zone tucked behind it. So we could, I think, if everyone's open to it, we could encourage that deliveries occur at that zone rather than on Summer Street, because I agree. The last thing we want to do is create an issue with the bike lane and deliveries.
Yeah, I mean, like from my personal standpoint and thinking about sort of how do we, promote pedestrian and bicycle safety along Summer, which is a pretty major east to west. I think that makes more sense to me. Some sort of signage. I'll defer to the planning staff in whether or not that, you know, kind of makes more sense from what's allowed in street signage. And I'll cede the floor back to you, Mr. Chair. Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your questions and comments on the bike lane and protections for it. I also want to give you props for recognizing that Central Street is one hell of a hill to bike up. I grew up on Central Street and I've been biking up Central Street since I was 9 years old. And it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I used to bike the top of Winter Hill to Kendall. It's uphill both ways.
Oh, God. Oh, okay. Amelia, you had some questions.
Thank you. I'll be very brief because Erin in her last item there really addressed everything I wanted to articulate, I think. But I'd just like to be another voice saying that I'm not really comfortable with the loading provisions that have been made. I don't think that pulling up on Summer Street, given the bike lane, is a viable way to manage the volume of deliveries that I expect to be made, not just Amazon, all kinds of things for a building of this size. And I also find it unlikely that drivers will follow a direction to instead circle the block to come up on School Street, where they have to park in a way that is visually around the corner to access the lobby to get through with the key fob in a way that will be time consuming. So, you know, I watch a USPS truck pull into the bike lane every single day to deliver mail on my block. And I think that it's not just Amazon, there's a wide variety of users, including rideshare drop-offs, that I think we need a better solution that will ensure that this is going to be safe functionally, not just, you know, if everyone follows signage as directed. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. So to the applicant, you've got a number of members here, myself included, that are concerned about your loading zone access and how it impacts you know, pedestrian, bike, and other mobility access. And I think we would encourage you to revisit that idea to mitigate some of the concerns that my colleagues have raised. I'm going to go a different path. Looking at the slide that you've got up right now, I'm looking at the top left corner, and it's giving me PTSD. I had the misfortune of living in Mather House and having many friends that also lived there, and that's what it looks like. They call it, you know, the box that Dunster House came in, and it's a horrendous look to me. That is completely out of scale and style for that neighborhood and for Somerville. That looks like something out of the 1970s designed to corral student protests. The rest of the building actually looks pretty good, and I welcome the brick and the dock, but the building on the corner needs to be, in my estimation, reimagined. That does not look like anything in Somerville, whether it is a piece of architecture that is traditionally found in the city or that has been modified to be some of the more contemporary styles that we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years. That looks like something out of brutalism. And that is something that, I know that there are some fans of brutalism. Boston City Hall gets a big shout out from architects all the time, and I still don't know why. I think that corner looks absolutely abysmal. And I want to see modifications to that corner before I can consider supporting this application, on top of the concerns that were already raised by my colleagues. The concept of the building is great. I think we are largely in support of what you're trying to do. I think it needs to be improved in the ways that my colleagues have raised, and for me, in conjunction with them, but also stylistically on this second portion of the building. I saw this when you first submitted it, and I was really kind of taken aback by what I thought was completely out of touch with anything that you'll find in this city, and really even in Cambridge and Boston, outside of older government buildings and some academic buildings. And I was disappointed in this aspect of your application, and I would very much like to see a revised plan for the way that this corner of the building is presented to the street, because this is not anything that you see in Somerville. And it's, to me, you've described it as modern. I don't think it's modern. I think this is 1972, and that's not to me a good thing. So I would ask you to come back to us in a few weeks, or if it takes longer, then to address the concerns that the board has raised tonight. I expect that you will also be getting some written testimony in from folks from the public before next Friday that the board will take into consideration, and that I expect will be passed along to you as well, to work with the staff to address our concerns and the concerns of the public. And I would welcome you back in a few weeks, because I am not ready to vote on this application tonight the way it has been presented to us and the concerns that the board has for it. I think this is a good beginning. I think the concept, as I said, is a strong one, and one that I, as one member, supports. But if we're going to be voting on an application for this site, it needs to be improved. So I would ask you to come back in a few weeks with modifications that would address our concerns and any concerns that the public might raise in public testimony, to the extent that that can be made. So I don't know if you guys have any questions for me or for staff or for other members of the board right now, before we thank you for the application and welcome you back in a few weeks.
Thank you for the feedback, Chair. Yeah, we appreciate it. I mean, it's been, I mean, these are the types of comments that have helped us make this application stronger. I guess my one question is, how does this work in conjunction with the design review, or with design review?
So they are not the permit granting authority. We are. They are advisory. We can and sometimes do take their advice. We can and do regularly not take their advice. So if you want to speak to DRC on some of the questions that we raised, you're welcome to do that, but bear in mind they are in no way binding to how this board can and will vote.
Okay, thanks for the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, may I make a quick comment to the applicant?
Who's talking?
This is Jahan.
Oh, Jahan, sorry, you're a tiny little square in my thing. I didn't see. I'm sorry, man. Yeah, of course.
No problem at all. First of all, I want to thank the applicant for completing this presentation. I share the chairman's concern about the corner, and I'm far from a design/aesthetic expert, but just knowing Summer Street and that corner, I think there can be some improvements made there. My question is really around the ADA accessibility. Would it be possible for the applicant to just comment on the ADA accessibility to the building as well as the green space? This was something that was highlighted in Councillor Ewan Campton's letter to the board, and I'd love to get the applicant's thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Sure, I can certainly speak to the ADA accessibility. This is Ryan from Embark. So I guess out of the gate, so our lobby to the building is set flush with the sidewalk, and we will be resetting all the ADA transitions on the sidewalk as part of the whole perimeter improvement project. So the whole complete streets aspect of ADA and everything associated with it will be taken care of as part of this project. From once you have the zero barrier entry to the lobby itself, you'd be getting into the elevator, which would take you up the 6 feet delta to the first floor itself. And then from there, you're in the common corridor, and the amenity deck is set flush with the common corridor itself. So there's complete access to all aspects to this building via the elevator for someone in a wheelchair or disabled. Part of the neighborhood process we went through and the feedback we sought was that people wanted to see this ramp. Basically, the comment was that if the elevator was to go down in a power outage, they'd like access to the building for those in a wheelchair. So we designed the ramp at the top of the page here to go from the sidewalk along School Street, and you see it goes all the way up to stair 2, the entry door stair 2. So you can get from the street to the stair 2 and then to the common hallway via the ramp via wheelchair. So everything is fully accessible, and this is a rental project. So per the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, MAAB, we have 5% of our dwelling units are designed to be Group 2 accessible. So that's kind of full-blown accessibility in terms of grab bars, turning radius, that type of thing. So that would be 2 units in this development are full-blown wheelchair accessible. The rest are Group 1 accessible, which means that they have the spatial provisions to be modified. They have blocking in the walls for grab bars, that type of thing, but they're not fit out as accessible day one. So I hope that answers the ADA question.
Thank you very much. It does, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Rob, I saw you. Do you have another question?
Yeah, very brief follow-up. With respect to the corner design, I agree with what my colleagues have said, and I'm thinking as you go back to take another review at this, it may be in part the renderings aren't doing a great favor, because I'm not sure that we can see the texture or the quality of the materiality from a fiber cement panel. It just reads as kind of flat and not much there. I do like the wood around the windows, and I think that that's not really coming through in the drawings. So I think maybe there's as much around the images as it is sort of the materiality, and kind of trying to bring a little bit more richness to what is a residential building and not an institutional building. Thank you.
Thanks very much. If there's no other comments or questions from members of the board, I would like to invite the applicant to return to us in a few weeks. So the chair will move to continue discussion on this application to the 21st, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye if she can unmute herself.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Right. Thank you all. See you in a few weeks with some revised plans, and if not the 21st, sometime thereafter. And again, the written comment will be held open until the 15th at noon. So thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Going to ask the applicant for 872 Broadway to be unmuted and their screen to be shared to the extent that they have a presentation, and for the applicant and or their representative to introduce themselves, the team, for the record, please.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I am unmuting Attorney Ann Vigorito and Architect Phil Sima. Phil, hang on for just a second and I will upgrade you to presenter.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Ann Vigorito, I am the attorney for the applicant. My office address is 424 Broadway, Somerville. So I'm here this evening relative to 872 Broadway. The owner and applicant for this project is 872 Broadway LLC. Alon Sassoon is one of the managers. He is also present this evening for any questions. And then Philip Sima of Balance Architects. He's our architect, part of our team. So I'll be brief in my proposal because I'd like to be able to hand things off to Phil to go over the plans with everyone. This is currently, or it was a single family dwelling, and this is an MR3 zoning district. And I think as stated earlier, the relief sought is for site plan approval for construction of the building. The proposal is to basically demo the principal structure and construct a 3-story net zero general building. There'll be commercial space on the first level and 12 residential units above. And this building is adjacent, just to give you a point of location, it's adjacent to the small strip of stores at Powder House Circle. Therefore, this will be extending the existing commercial strip along Broadway. The commercial space will most likely be occupied by a restaurant. That's what the applicant and owner will be looking for here. This proposal had 2 neighborhood meetings. The first one was on March 9th of 2021. After that, they went off to the UDC on March 23rd of 2021. And after that, they were approved and they had their second neighborhood meeting on April 12th of 2021. I mean, the proposal overall was well received. However, you know, it is in the staff report as well, but both meetings residents did have concerns relative to parking. As this is going from being a single family with a driveway to 12 residential units. But, you know, this site is a half a mile from a transit area. The residents in the units will not be eligible for any on-street parking passes. The site will have long-term bicycle parking spaces and short-term bicycle parking located in the front of the site. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Phil Sima so he can go through the plans, and then any other questions from the board, maybe we would entertain them then if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
All right, hi, I'm Philip Sima with Balance Architects. Can everyone hear me and see the screen, 872 Broadway? Great, well, thank you so much. So this is kind of our cover page showing our rendering, but I'll speed past it and get into kind of more details in just a second. So as Ann was saying, it's right kind of at the roundabout at Powder House Square over here. We have this kind of interesting continuous whole block building that we directly abut and share a driveway with on the side. This is the existing building, kind of a mix of vinyl siding, residential with this kind of brick area that actually abutted right on the front, similar to the adjacent commercial spaces to the left. So the zoning is MR3 with and it abuts an R district in the rear. It is within the walk shed, so we are not providing parking, but we are providing bicycle parking for all the residents and units. It is not on a pedestrian street. However, we are proposing a commercial use that is consistent with that, a restaurant or cafe. So, you know, working with planning, we believe the building to be fully compliant with the Somerville zoning ordinance. We'll go through in each kind of step throughout the drawing or throughout the presentation, but if anyone has any questions, we can refer back to this. So in terms of the lot coverage, the building takes up the majority of the site. There is some areas that are paved, especially for the concrete area that we will be having where the trash and recycling is. There's also some lot coverage due to the transformer, but we do have a significant rear yard setback, so we're able to very easily hit our green score. So this is the basic architectural site plan. So we have on the ground floor the commercial entry, a large, well, not large, but takes up the majority of the footprint, is about 1,800 square feet. On the ground floor, we also have access for this space to access the basement directly. We would imagine that, if this is a restaurant, restaurants always struggle for space, whether it's kitchen or back of the house. So we've kind of allotted ample space for them downstairs. The residential entry is off to the bottom of the plan here, and we worked a lot with the UDC to come up with kind of a design that really distinguishes it from the commercial entry. Part of the conversation from the last presentation brought up the idea of a vestibule, unlocked vestibule. That's a great idea. I think we need one right here, so we will add that, unless people don't think it's a great idea. And then, oops, pardon me, elevator, stairs into the lobby, and then access to the trash and recycling in the back over here. And then the retail or the restaurant area has a great area for kind of outdoor seating. It is at the grade of the restaurant, so you're kind of in this nice little, enclosure or slightly below this retaining wall where there are trees above. And I'm gonna hop to the landscape plan, just because this is illustrative of what's going on the ground floor as well. Pardon the 90-degree rotation, but we see along here, this is Broadway. So in the front, we have our pavers that are on top of our property line to make sure we're maintaining that 12-foot wide sidewalk requirement, as well as a setback for the building. We have a mix of pavers that correspond to the bays above, so it's a change in kind of the type of paving stone. In the back, we have a walkway that kind of gets you to the back, where we have an access agreement with the abutting neighbor to have our transformer back here. So that's how we're able to kind of scoot that all the way in the back of the site. The outdoor seating area is all pavers, again, kind of relating to some of the fenestration that's happening on the upper floors, and then trash and recycling for the residential and commercial areas, as well as this landscape buffer between the NR zone. We have an existing street tree, which we are protecting, as well as 3 short-term bike parking spots on kind of adjacent to that street tree. In terms of lighting and site lighting, where we do have a slight overhang on the building above, we would have basically can lights lighting that path, and then cylindrical sconces along the front in these kind of pilasters. They're not really pilasters, but basically in the bays between the windows, as well as one by the residential entry. And then again, cylindrical downlights, along the building here. We probably coordinate with whatever tenant came in there to make sure there was sufficient lighting if they wanted to eat outside. And this is kind of the signage plan that we have. We're really going for something that's kind of very minimal, very clean, very simple. So we're proposing basically some W section steel that is a canopy entry that kind of slightly overhangs this main entry over here. And then again, you're seeing to our right, this is a residential entry where we introduce these basically metal panels to distinguish from the brick that it's not a commercial area. I'm going to skip past these FAR calculations and this. So this is the basement plan that we talked about. So there is direct access from the commercial area to allow back of house purposes for whatever that tenant would want. We also have a common mechanical area. As Ann mentioned, we are going for the net zero density bonus. We're going the passive house route. We do have some common utilities. We tend to find that domestic hot water is a lot better to be common. We also have our ERV, our balanced ventilation. That's also common. It's not in the basement, but our hot water is in the basement, common mechanical. We have we're showing 14 long-term bike parking spots, 12 are required. It fits down here. It's all accessed by an elevator. The entire building is accessible, all group 1 units. And then the bike parking is in the basement, so tenants would take their bikes down the elevator. It should fit, it can fit a stretcher, so it shouldn't really be much of an issue. And then we have areas for residential storage in the rear over here. So I think we already went through the ground floor. I'm just going to go up, show the residential units. So all the units are studios. They're quite small, but they're also very compact and efficient in terms of how they're laid out with the kitchen and bathrooms. And as the owner of the property has kind of expressed that these are really, we imagine the target market to be kind of students, people at Tufts, people that don't necessarily need a large building or a large unit. The units along Broadway, they all have balconies that are compliant with the Somerville zoning ordinance in terms of 50 square foot minimum, 5 by 10. And they match up with those bays along the front here. And then we do not have the balconies in the rear, but we do have a common roof deck area that meets our outdoor amenity space. So third floor, the units are stacking exactly as before. And then when we get up to the roof, both the stairs and the elevator get to the roof. So we have a space for some of that common mechanical area over here, perhaps on top of these stairs. The units would be heated and cooled by heat pumps. We only need about 12 of them, so it's like a very small footprint for those. But I'm going to show the landscape plan for the roof because it's much nicer. So this is the landscape plan for the roof, again, showing the stairs coming up, the elevator coming up. We would have a roof deck, whether that's actually pavers or wood. It would probably be the kind that's on top of pedestals just to reduce thermal bridging for the passive house approach. And then really great opportunities for kind of sedum with specific planters along here, whether they're potted. These are showing potted plants along here, as well as kind of a gravel trough along the edges. So it's a really great amenity, and from a design perspective, we love the idea of kind of greenery, almost like overflowing and just showing the little tips of things as you can see it from the street. So that is the roof plan. In terms of the elevation, we're keeping this as a very simple and clean building. The bays connect on the ground floor all the way up to the second and third floor. However, they're really kind of distinct in their appearance. We have a masonry on the ground floor, a brick, as well as on the upper floors, a phenolic resin panel that clearly distinguishes the residential and the commercial spaces. And then on the top, like we're always trying to go for this kind of tripartite design where the base, you have a base, a middle, and top. And the top for us is really kind of that landscape that will be kind of creeping over the edge, as well as what we've tried to do is make the stairwells and the elevator shaft like really sculptural, using the same type of materials and making it part of the design. And then again, on the ground floor, you can kind of see that distinguish or the distinct differences between the residential entry and commercial entry. So this is the rear elevation. Unfortunately, we can't fit the balconies back here due to setbacks, but still tons of light, tons of glazing. You know, these would be, I guess, you know, I don't know if you want to call them European style, but they're tilt and turn high performance windows. So they will, you know, allow tons of air and light in there. And then basically some glazing for the restaurant on the ground floor, and then kind of that a screened off trash and recycling area to the left. Because we are directly on the property line in what is, you know, the plan south, we have this, there's no fenestration on here, which is actually great when you're trying to do a passive house because windows are tough. But we've also kind of tried to treat it, again, with some of the same materials and expressing these elements as sculptural on the upper floor. We're also 2 feet from the property line on the other side. So we do tuck the building back on the bottom. We do have some opportunity for a door along the side. But again, really the focus on the building is front and back. So these are some of the materials that we looked at using. So this is a phenolic resin panel. This is, and why we choose to use things that look like wood and not wood itself is because things that look like wood rot and they look bad in 4 or 5 years. So we really want to keep this kind of, you know, for the longevity of it. Obviously brick does extremely well with that. So we're trying to use something that's really kind of earthy and textural, that has a feeling of weight to it. And then between the bays, we're using ACM panels. So I have a rendering in the kind of next page that will, you know, you'll clearly see that. And then these are that style of tilt and turn windows. We love the Rayhaus because they're very cost effective and still meet the Passive House standards and are really beautiful windows. This is kind of your standard building section, really ample height between the levels or clear space, 9'7". So we wanted to push the clear height for the units because they were small to help them feel larger, to get more light in there. And then again, we're kind of meeting that requirement on the ground floor for the commercial space to also be higher than the residential floors. So just some general massing. Again, here clearly you can see in the rear that depressed area for the outdoor seating. So it should kind of create this nice little cloistered environment down there. And then these were just renderings. Obviously they don't include, I apologize, all of the kind of landscape on the top, but we tried to incorporate more realistic materials, the actual sun direction, the feeling of those balconies projecting above the sidewalk from kind of both sides. And there you kind of see it looking back towards Powerhouse Square. So I think that's my presentation. If anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thanks very much. I'm going to reserve my comments until after the public testimony has concluded. I don't know if any members of the board have any comments or questions now. No? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to open up this portion of the public hearing to anyone that wants to speak in support of the application. Please raise your hand now and I'll call on you. Going once, going twice. I see one person, Ara Sher.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I am unmuting Ara Sher.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Ara Shore. I live on Walker Street, which is right across from this project. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited to see this project being proposed. It is the first project under the new zoning that's in my neighborhood, and it's really amazing to see so much new housing going up, including affordable housing, and also that we are looking at a building that really commits to Summer Vision 2040 and the mobility goals and the climate goals that the city has put forward. So I wanted to speak in favor of it. It's going to be less than 200 feet from me, and I can't wait to see it built. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else that wants to speak in support of the application, please raise your hand. Scrolling up again. Seeing none, I will close this portion of the public hearing and open it up to anyone that wants to speak in opposition or express concern about the application for 872 Broadway. Going one. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing. And
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking.
Did I miss someone?
I am very sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Porter had raised his hand right as you were beginning to do the last call.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I did not. I have not. I will make sure that Mr. Porter is unmuted and can be heard tonight.
He is now.
Okay, thank you very much. Meredith Porter, 104 Josephine Avenue. I'm not really speaking in opposition. I have a concern here, which I raised at the very first neighborhood meeting. I raised this in the neighborhood meeting. I also sent an email to Phil at Balance Architects. And here's my message. I believe you're working on the proposed project at 872 Broadway in Somerville. So there's one thing I noticed about the project that I wanted to point out to you. The width of the sidewalk appears to be 10 feet 5 inches to the start of the curb and 11 inches to the edge of the curb. So I think the front setback will need to be increased from 2 feet to at least 3 feet, or maybe 3 feet 7 inches, because of section 4116A A1 of the zoning ordinance, which states When development occurs on any lot abutting a sidewalk that is less than 12 feet in total width, the building must be set back an additional distance to accommodate expansion of the abutting sidewalk to a width of at least 12 feet. The minimum and maximum front setbacks for each building type are increased accordingly. And if you look at the plans, you will see in zoning table Z04, the front setback shown as 2.4 feet. In Z05, the plans show 2 feet 1 1/4 inches. So I don't see an increase in the setback for the sidewalk width. And I know perhaps it's a technicality. I know this is only on the second and third floors, but it was also, by the way, recorded in the minutes of the meeting, and it's not exactly reflected in the report on the neighborhood meeting because that's a digested form which just says that setbacks will be complied with. So that's my main point. I also just wanted to note that the same concerns that I expressed on 73 Summer Street with proper notice apply here. In other words, notice was not posted at the building. Notice was not posted at City Hall. And I'll just add regarding City Hall that there is not an exemption because of COVID. I spoke with Clerk John Long some time ago. I've been pursuing this matter with the city since March, and I haven't been getting a response. And I'll also add regarding the neighborhood meetings that it really is a serious issue that those notices are not posted at City Hall because they are not, no neighborhood meeting has ever been posted on the city calendar, ever. So the only public notice other than, say, Facebook of neighborhood meetings is via that posting, which would be at City Hall. And I've expressed this to the director, and I really hope that that's addressed. She's aware of it, so just noting it. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The architect can respond to that if you want, or
I will ask for the architect to hold off for now on those comments and questions. I will note that it has always been the understanding of this board that neighborhood meetings are not official city meetings that would require notice, that they are organized generally by the ward councilor and the developer and are circulated in those circles and are not official meetings of the city of Somerville, which would indicate why they weren't on the city calendar. I would like Charlotte at least to address some of the other questions about what Mr. Porter had raised, and I will also invite the applicant after that to address some of the questions.
Mr. Chair, this is Charlotte Lee speaking. Regarding the question about the setback requirements, if the upper stories of the building are set closer than they are required, that may have been my error in not catching that. But from a functional perspective, those upper stories are still on private property, and the focus of the setback requirement is to have a 12-foot sidewalk. Having a 14-foot ground story with therefore 14 feet of clearance for a 12-foot sidewalk. If the board does not view the inches or foot projection beyond the 12-foot setback that the upper stories may be doing, the board could certainly approve this project. That would be, I think, a minor deviation from the code and very much in keeping with the intent of the code.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the applicant to respond to the question that was raised by the public.
Yep. Hi, this is Philip Sema. So yeah, when that was brought up in the first meeting, we then worked with our civil team to make sure that we had our street dimension from a stamped land surveyor, and we had adjusted the building accordingly to make sure that it was meeting the Somerville zoning ordinance. So we think we're in compliance, and we took that question or comment into effect right after the first meeting.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to members of the board right now to ask questions or make comments to the applicant or of staff. I have a few, but I will defer to my colleagues. Rob, Amelia. Rob
I feel
first.
like I always get in quick. I try to go slower. Hey, thank you for this very straightforward presentation. I certainly appreciate that. I wanted to call your attention to what I think it might be an inconsistency in a couple of the images that are available to us tonight. The first one is on the one that's visible to us right now. The balconies on the cover page, you know, I'm kind of eyeballing it, but those are not 5'3" projections over the sidewalk. Those look much closer to about 2.5, whereas the perspective Z.4.1, as well as some of the other documents, you know, show that larger balcony projection over the sidewalk, which based on the staff memo, my understanding is the applicant would need city council approval to exceed about 2.5 feet over into the sidewalk. So my first question to the applicant is, you know, if this board were to approve the 5'3" balconies as they are proposed in the later pages of this application, but the city council did not approve that request, what would you then do with respect to the balconies as you've proposed them?
Sure. So yeah, my apologies. This is the pretty image. This is not the accurate image. This one has all the greenery. So the last pages and the rest of the kind of drawings kind of accurately show what that 5-foot minimum requirement, you know, that's a Somerville zoning ordinance requirement. So that's kind of where that's coming from. So should we not be allowed to put them over the street, I believe that we still would be allowed to have a 1-foot projection style Juliet balcony. We certainly want something where people can open up to the street. So we'd like to have the 5x10 minimum requirement balconies as shown here and in the rest of the plans. And if not, Juliet style.
This is a follow-up to that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I understand the minimum dimensions for a balcony, but if there are no balconies on this building, is it true that the rooftop amenity space is sufficient to meet the zoning requirements for outdoor amenity space for all of the units in this building, all residential units?
Yeah. That would be 324 square feet that would be required. And we have 960 square feet if we didn't have the balcony. So, you know, we have a lot of space on here.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, those clarifications. My other, and as long as we're looking at this image, or I'm sorry, the west side elevation that you had, and I don't know the dot, Z dot, I'm not sure what the dots are, the page number is. But I noticed that the signage appears, oh, thank you, sort of tucked under the balcony and is projecting away from the building. From a pedestrian perspective, I'm not sure if you were standing next to the building that you would even see the signage. Did you consider maybe putting the signage kind of below that overhang and so that it's you know, visible from someone at the street level?
I'm not sure. I guess I get what. Well, I'm not. I'm not sure. I think this might be the best image to look at it. I guess we hadn't really considered it in other ways. Could you help me clarify kind of that point? I think I lost it a little bit about a different way to show it.
Yeah, sorry. I was just, you know, I was kind of looking at it going, well, if I'm standing where the in front of that orange cone, you almost have to step away from the building to look up to see the signage. And again, it's really mostly for the deliveries and whatnot. I just want to make sure that they know where they're going. And I appreciate your proposed addition for a unlocked vestibule for that purpose. So it was a question. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on the signage, but to me, it just seemed like it would be more visible if it were not projecting out so far. And I guess my last comment is on the cover page, don't move them from this page. That page that we were just looking at, it doesn't show like landscaping around in front of the storefront windows. Whereas on the cover page it does. And I looked on some of the plans, the two-dimensional plans, and whereas there is illustration of landscaping in the rear, it doesn't show those like planter boxes that you have. So just as you're, circling in on a final version of this, I guess I would just be sure that each page is consistent and shows that you're proposing, sidewalk landscaping that does not impede within the required sidewalk dimensions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. Amelia, I think you had your hand raised too, is that right?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand the applicant's feeling that the sort of tripartite structure is addressed through the sculptural nature of the projecting elements on the roof, and I very much appreciate, frankly, the appeal of that in the renderings where that's clearly visible. But I don't see that as something that is visible from the more photo integrated renderings that are being shown. Those projections are, as we know, in fact, quite far back in the building, and the pedestrian line of sight that I believe is being shown on page, is it 24 and forward, does not really convey urbanistically that same sense of partition. So I'm curious if that's a sort of trick of the perspective here, and if we could get some clarification on it, because while I think I see the design intent, I'm not sure that it is going to be executed based on what we're seeing from this set of imagery.
Sure. So I guess I want to do a general apologies for all of my kind of renderings not being necessarily consistent with kind of what we're showing in the plans. This was primarily done to understand the effect of the 5-foot balconies, as we had kind of 2-foot balconies beforehand. I think this is really not a pedestrian rendering. This is in the middle of a street, but as you're along Broadway, I think you are going to see kind of some of these elements, especially the stairwell along here. You can already start to see it. So as you're coming further down the street, I really do think it's going to read as something a little different at the top. I mean, most of our buildings kind of have cornices to end basically that top level. And this one, we modeled it, we looked at it and felt like this is like kind of really this special sculptural, almost like a piece of like a furniture approach to it. And so that's why we kind of removed the cornice and then tried to have that kind of stepping up effect. And I'm happy to provide, other types of views than what we're showing now to really make sure that that is actually the effect. But, especially, again, I'm not showing landscaping in this perspective, but with the proximity of it being so close to the parapet, certainly you'd start to kind of see that little light kind of wispy edge to it that would make the difference.
Respectfully, the landscaping probably won't be in full bloom about 7 months of the year, if not more. So depending on that as an architectural feature that defines the edge of the building is perhaps not a realistic solution, but I would certainly be interested in better understanding what the perspective will in fact be, because I'm looking at Google Earth on my other screen here, and like I think Street View is often used as a proxy for the pedestrian view. So the fact that I'd really like to understand this better, since you are pushing back on the UDC's recommendation of the cornice. I'm open to your, very open to your defense of that, but I don't see it, I don't see it clearly here, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Who else before I go? No? Okay. You guys started the presentation by talking about the building next to you, the one that wraps around Powerhouse Boulevard, and the Rotary as a very interesting and unique building. That's right. It is a kind of a cool building. All the other buildings around that area are old single-family homes, of which are now all divided up, but still retain that character, except for the one directly next to you, which basically looks exactly like the building that's currently there. This is a boring building, guys. This is a box. This is a box that you claim has a third part to it at the top that none of us can recognize unless we look at it from kind of a bird's eye view. It looks like a topless building. It looks like a flat building. It looks like a building that's flat with no top that you decide to throw a couple of massive overhanging balconies over the sidewalk on. It looks kind of awful. It looks like an afterthought. And for a building that has so much promise for being net zero and all these other good things that we're trying to achieve, it looks lazy. It looks like you guys said, we're going to make a bunch of boxes and throw some balconies on that are apparently 5 feet long into a 12-foot sidewalk or 11.5-foot sidewalk, with maybe some trees that, as Amelia's right, are going to be dead for half the year. That looks absolutely nothing like anything around it, and that has no interesting or unique aspects to it, kind of like the building next to it that you referenced as being interesting and unique. I'm not impressed with what you've presented tonight. I think the board has some significant and serious issues about what you've presented today. I'd like you to come back with something that looks like a Somerville building that actually has a cornice. It's nice that you're trying to do something a little bit different, but this doesn't look different. This looks like you've taken a building that was already there, a warehouse or something, and kind of made residences out of it, with some out of place and out of scale balconies that are overhanging 5 feet into the sidewalk. I'm not loving what I'm seeing. I think you took what could have been a good project and made it unimpressive and not in keeping with almost anything else that I can think of in that neighborhood. I get that we can do a bigger building. I get that we are encouraging more units. I recognize that you were throwing a walk shed and not including parking, but Jesus, guys, like this is a brick. This is a box. This is not what we're looking for. We're looking for something interesting. We're looking for something that's going to be cohesive and dynamic with the neighborhood and with the city. And this looks like something that, I don't know, could have a bank in it. So I would encourage you to come back with a design that reflects what this board is hoping to get out of this building, in recognition of the interesting architectural building that you've got next door and the buildings that you've got all along Broadway. This isn't Davis Square. This is outside of Davis Square. This is a residential neighborhood that happens to have a small little commercial building next to it. This is not in keeping with what this neighborhood is. So I would beg you to come back with something more interesting and in keeping with what this board has raised concerns about tonight. So that's what I've got to say to you now. And I don't know if anybody on staff has any comments about what we've raised. I know Charlotte has talked about the sidewalk width, and that may need some consideration by the board, but this building is, I think there is much to be desired for what could be here.
Can I respond to that at all?
You can.
So obviously there is a lot of backstory, and
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. This is Rebecca speaking. Can you please identify yourself for the record?
Oh, sorry. Hi, this is Philip Sema from Balance Architects. So, there's a lot of backstory for kind of how we get to these designs. And, I don't ever want it to seem like we're cheapening out or simplifying something. I think we did 15 or 20 iterations, all kind of looking at, the context, some of the things that might be more traditional. We kind of got some response, from direct abutters that they love it. And, the UDC on the first time really expressed that it was quite unique. So we're certainly going to go and take another look at it. But I just want you to know that there was a lot of thought that went into this, and we are treating this as kind of something. It's really difficult in architecture to make something simple and beautiful. And it's kind of comes down to those details, and that's the approach that we were trying to take with this. So that's my response.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing a revision in a few weeks. Does anybody have any other comments or questions for the applicant or of staff? Erin?
This is maybe more sort of a personal comment. I actually kind of like the modern style. So I'm actually kind of glad that we have sort of different opinions on the board. In some ways, it's kind of refreshing. The other question that I had is more for staff, and that's around the balcony dimensions. I was just referencing the adopted ordinance, and in the MR3 planning district, the size requirements for the balcony, the minimum and maximum width is both that 5 foot, which I believe is what's leading to the dimensions of the balconies here. And sort of the question for staff is, what is the origin of that 5 foot projection on the balconies? And, are there ways to, like, I guess, must it be that 5 foot, right? I think that's my question entirely. Yeah.
This is Charlotte speaking. I did not help write the ordinance, but from talking to people who were involved in writing it, my understanding is that the goal of a balcony is to provide outdoor amenity space. And one of the purposes of outdoor amenity space is to be able to provide outdoor seating, basically, for private residential units. And I think the dimensions for balconies were chosen in order to facilitate the ability to have outdoor seating. So that's kind of my understanding of the history. In terms of whether other design options are possible, there's kind of there's a line between being a building component and being just kind of nice architectural design articulation, which is what Juliet balconies would fall under. But then there's kind of this, it's not an uncanny valley, but it's an uncanny valley of, if you're in between those, you're neither a Juliet balcony that is architectural flourish, but you're also not a functional balcony. And so that's kind of where the code is not clear on. You are neither one thing that is permitted nor another that is permitted. If the board really wished to have slightly narrow balconies that did not project over the public way, I think the board would be welcome to require that. If we're already being continued, I would want to double check with colleagues to make sure on that. But my off the cuff answer is I think the board could condition that, but again, would want to double check.
Yeah, thanks very much for that explanation. I don't think I was suggesting maybe one way or another, more just trying to understand that 50 square foot gross area sort of requirement and, you know, basically those 5 foot projecting balconies and where it came from. So that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any comments or questions of staff or the applicant? No. Okay. Seeing none, I would welcome the applicant to come back in a few weeks, hopefully in my my goal to have some sort of a different rendering that we could consider, because I as one member am not impressed with the style that's been presented this evening, but I would welcome you to come back on the 21st or sometime thereafter. I'm also going to extend written comment to Friday the 15th at noon, as we traditionally do. And so I formally move to continue this application to the 21st, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Erin votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Great. Thank you all, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask a question on behalf of the team. Is it your recommendation that we work with the planning staff with the redesign? Will some direction be coming from the planning staff? The architect, I think, he came up with this, this has been worked on for well over a year as far as the, design and so forth. So we want to have the right direction so that, we're going to please the planning board the next time we're before you.
So I may be an outlier on this board on the style, and that might be true. I would ask that additional renderings and alternative renderings, as we have done with other projects in the past, be presented so that we can envision other ideas of what this building could look like. I mean, I know I have concerns, and I may be the lone no vote here, and that might be the case. But I would like the opportunity to be able to vote yes on something that might be a little bit more pleasing. So I would invite you to work with staff, Attorney Vigorito. I would invite you to take into consideration some of the things that I've said, that members of the board and members of the public have said about the way this building projects, about the way that this building does not have a defined top. And hopefully come to us with something that's a modification from what we've seen tonight. That's how I would advise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted the clarity so that the architect and the rest of the team can get working on that. And if the 21st isn't enough time, we'll alert planning staff. They may need a little more than that.
Absolutely fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
We have two more items on our agenda, both of which have been previously heard and presented, and we received a good amount of testimony on both of them. I would ask first for which one is the park? It's 111, right?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Yes, it's the park.
Okay, the park was had fewer questions from the board and from the public, so I would invite the applicant to make to reopen 111 South Street, and I believe Amelia now has to recuse herself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Have a nice night.
You also.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Rebecca speaking. I am unmuting Rola Itris and Ian Ramey and John Fenton. Everybody is currently unmuted and reads as self-muted on this end.
Rebecca, this is John Fenton. Can you hear me at this point?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I think Rola's going to start off here.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Chair. Are you guys expecting us to present, or would you guys like to go forward with questions? We don't really have anything new to present tonight. So happy to answer any questions that came up.
I was not expecting any new presentation from the applicant. We just wanted to recognize you to get you on the agenda for this particular application. We've heard testimony, we've seen the application. I, as one member, am very impressed with that, with the application for the park and the presentation. And I would invite the board to make any other questions or comments known to the applicant or of staff. Rob?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm supportive of this application. I think it is really very strong. We're talking about the park here. With the one condition I might suggest adding is that final placement of the catenary light, be determined in consultation with the planning staff. So to avoid pedestrian conflicts. My recollection is several of the posts were positioned sort of kind of right in the way of people's movement. And I think upon further study, you may find a solution there. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Anybody else for the park? No. Okay, we have a staff memorandum that addresses all of the considerations that the board needs to make. It also includes a number of conditions. Does the board have any additional conditions that they would like to include within the application for 111 South Street? Okay. Seeing none, we need to consider whether the comprehensive plan and policies and standards established by the city have been met by this application, that it meets the intent of the zoning district where the property is located, and whether the application provides the appropriate mitigation to the impacts attributable to the proposed development. We have kind of discussed all of those and they are addressed in the memorandum. So following public testimony and review of the submitted materials and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions the application for site plan approval for the development of a civic space at 111 South Street. Seconded by Aaron. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Congratulations, we have a unanimous vote. I would like the applicant to now open up 121 South Street. I don't know if there's any additional presentation by the applicant based on some comments that were raised by the board at the last meeting.
Mr.
or
Chair, this is
by staff.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I just wanted to note that I have also unmuted Victor Agran, who might have input. So the entire team that has worked on 122 South Street is now unmuted and able to speak if they choose to do so.
Thank you, Rebecca. This is Rola speaking with Leggett McCall. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did submit a few updated plans and renderings at the request of Rob last time. So we don't really have anything else to share tonight unless you want to go through those again. Otherwise, we leave it to you for any questions that have come up in the meantime.
No, I know that there had been a question on, I believe it was one of Rob's questions, and I believe staff was going to address one of the questions that had to do with the code and what the code provided for mitigation. I'm wondering if we could raise that now.
This is Rola speaking. Rob, did you want to ask that question again? I'm just not clear on which part of the code you're referring to.
Am I misremembering Rob's questions from last time? I thought there was something having to do with what the code can require in certain aspects of the project versus what we would be required to condition.
I wish I could be helpful, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure I'm recollecting that specific concern.
This is Rola speaking. I don't recall a code discussion, but we were questioning a condition that was related to the ADA access ramp and platform that's abutting the civic space. And so the original condition kind of listed that we needed to provide an easement for the monumental stair, the terrace, as well as the slope green and platform and ramp. So I think it was just a language thing that we wanted to clear up with the city and say that, you know, we will convey those as part of our covenant, but there won't be an easement right now before this vote. It would be based on built conditions and C of O of building. So we agreed on those together with PSUF and planning. And I think we came to, you know, a revised condition that we agreed on last week. So that was the update on that.
Okay, you know what, actually, I think it was, and I hate to bring it back. I think Rob had a question on some of the renderings with the glazing. And that's actually what it was. And I'm sorry, it skipped my mind as to exactly what his question was. And I think that is something that can be addressed by staff and is not something that's necessarily required to be in a condition outside of that issue being able to be remedied by staff. And I'm wondering if Rebecca could just make sure that I'm not off base on that one.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. You are correct that, I mean, in general, the project must meet the standards for glazing and reflectivity that are laid out in the ordinance. And should the board decide to do so, you could potentially, I would apologize. This is the case of my colleague, Andrew Graminsky, who was in charge of working with the applicant in order to bring them to this hearing. And so I'm not as familiar as he would with the conditions. There may at this point be a condition to do so, but the board could certainly ask that the applicant bring samples to staff to ensure that there is you know, verification. I would note that there is a condition which requires the production of manufacturer's information in order to be able to, for ISD, to ensure that the glazing choices are conforming with the ordinance.
Hello, Mr. Chair, Mike. This is Victor Gran with ARC, the architect. And referencing the glazing, I believe I answered that question last time we presented. And I indicated that it was just a function of the challenge of architectural renderings, and that architectural renderings tend to kind of over-reflect the sky. The key piece of the Somerville zoning ordinance that is a requirement is a certain level of visual light transmittancy and a low level of reflectivity, which we are complying with in terms of our glass type. And to confirm, we are making a visual mock-up of the specific glass that is required by the Somerville zoning ordinance, and that is triple paned glass with high visual light transmission and low reflectivity for both the podium and the tower.
If I can just also add to Victor, in the staff memo, there's actually a line that says material specifications from suppliers must be submitted to confirm fenestration glazing is compliant with the VLT and VLR ratings required by Somerville zoning ordinance. So that is actually part of the staff memo, and we will be, we can submit those specs as well.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I want to give my thanks to Ms. Idris, because that is exactly the condition that I was vaguely remembering, and I appreciate her reading that text.
I also appreciate it. It already exists and it's already addressed. I just wanted to make sure, because it was my understanding that was already addressed or could easily be addressed by a condition to have staff sign off. So,
Mr. Chair, while we're on the question of conditions, may I add one more element?
Of course.
I do want to note that there is an extremely minor error in the conditions on this staff memo. All projects that are submitted and go through development review with the city are required to submit a final as permitted set to close out their business with the Planning, Preservation and Zoning Division. And I just wanted to note that on that condition in this staff memo, it incorrectly lists the Zoning Board of Appeals as opposed to the Planning Board. Simple clerical error that we will make sure is handled when the decision is produced.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I mean, that's ministerial, but it's also important to note. With no other questions that I'm able to tell from the planning, Rob.
Oh, yeah, I have just a couple minor questions. First, I wanted to thank the applicant for submitting additional materials. It was very helpful, and I think my concern last time was really more around, I couldn't quite see the horizontal sunshades and the vertical fins in all of the renderings, but I now, with your supplemental materials, I can understand that they're there and that it's somewhat difficult to represent that, in a rendering. I really only had kind of one line of question that after having reviewed the supplemental materials, that I just needed to kind of run to the ground here, which was the UDC had reviewed your application, and my recollection was that they had said that the entrance to the winter market from the park, the suggestion was that it wasn't sufficiently differentiated from the upper massing of the building, and that it was just sort of reading as, kind of all glass all the way up. And in some of your materials, it would appear that you've gone back and added, either a different material above kind of the entry to that winter market with maybe opaque panels. But to be honest, other images still show it as kind of, glazing windows. So I'm honestly just not sure what you're proposing there to address the UDC's articulated concern. Is there anything that you can show from your materials that might help clarify kind of what the treatment there is?
Rob, this is Victor. I'm happy to share the presentation. If I could clarify the UDC's original comments. Our original presentation had shown the entry to the east side Winter Market abutting the civic space as a single-story volume on the outside, and it was a two-story volume on the inside. And the comments from the UDC were
Mr. Chair, this is
interior.
Rebecca speaking. My apology. In upgrading Mr. Agran to presenter, I apparently caused his audio to drop for just a minute. So Victor, could you please go back just a sentence or two and start again?
Oh, sure. So apologies. So what the UDC had said to us was their original presentation to the UDC was that we were showing a single-story volume on the exterior when in reality the Winter Market space abutting the civic space was a two-story volume, and their request was to be true to what that space was and make it a two-story volume. They did not ask us to change the material from glass to some other material, simply to register the physicality of a two-story volume that is on the interior, on the exterior, and that we subsequently made that change, which I can show if that will be helpful.
It would be helpful to me anyhow. Just I was looking at the new graphics and trying to understand whether we're talking something that's transparent or something that's semi-transparent or opaque.
Absolutely. And I can clarify that. So if you're looking at the ground level plan here, what we label as market or arts creative space abutting the civic space on the ground floor. On the level 2 floor, you see that white space that's labeled OTB, open to below, indicating that double height space. And then here you're seeing the landscape plan of the terrace and the park. And I'll quickly flip through some of the landscape images. This is the cross section of the sloped green roof that connects the level 2 terrace. And then
go one back there.
Yes, so this was a older view. So this is an older view that we're using to show the landscape.
Just to clarify, Victor, this is Rolla. So that what you see there as opaque, Rob, was where we were expressing the Winter Market more as like a single-story structure. So their exact comment there was that we're not being true to its double height, and they requested that it read as a double story from the outside. And that's when we removed that opaque band there and made it to read as a two-story glass structure, but then still created a reveal between the second level and the top of the building by creating sort of skylight and bump out. And you'll see that, I think, in one of the interior renderings that we kind of resubmitted.
Yes, well said, Rolla. This image was exactly what they were talking about, that they didn't like the original version of it. And then
that's satisfactory to me anyway. I think I was just getting tripped up because, you know, some of the images were old and some of them were new, and I wasn't sure. So that's exactly the one I really liked. Was I thought, well, this is what is amazing. This is what we want. But then the other one looked different. I thought, I just want to make sure that what we're seeing is what we're getting. And on this page here, you see how it's very open both to the left and to the right. I mean, there isn't like a wall or a separation from the lobby to this Winter Market, whereas some of the other images appeared to suggest that there was some type of a wall or division between this monumental stairway and the Winter Market. Can you just confirm for me that it will be open as it is shown here?
I think that's still to be worked out. The image that it will be, as you see here, is the configuration of the exterior wall and the way in which the space opens up to the civic space with the skylight and the kind of transparent facade that you're seeing there. And then the volume of the space will be the same. The rest of it is still being worked out in terms of leasing and building operations. So I can't speak to that.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll just say that, you know, for me anyway, I feel like I'm at a stage where, you know, still to be worked out is not really, it's hard for me to kind of just give it a thumbs up based on a still to be worked out later.
This is Rola speaking. If I can just hop in here. So one thing that we were considering here in this rendering is whether that is open or closed. But if, Victor, you go back to the plan that shows the stair as part of the lobby space, I think the struggle here is mechanical and how we regulate airflow, right? So the winter market needs to operate on its own, needs to open to the outside. So it's on its own, needs to operate individually versus the stair that's actually part of the lobby space. So you need to be able to get to that stair and go up to the other lobby on the second level. And that needs to operate mechanically individually versus this space. So I think that's where there's a rendering that shows the stair as separate. So that's been the kind of the conversation internally, whether we have that open and as part of the winter market, but then you don't have access to the top, or it's, you know, closed off, glazed, so you still see, you have visual connection, but then, you know, it's not part of the winter market. So that's been the thing there.
And apologies, Rob. I mean to clarify in that the massing, the perimeter, the setback, the whole design of the perimeter of the building all conforms to the Somerville zoning ordinance. And in particular, we've really worked hard to connect with the values of summer vision and placemaking. And so when I note still to be worked out, it's just reiterating what Rola said in terms of getting through the design documents and the construction drawings and really working through the specifics of the mechanical systems and the way in which the lobby works and the leasing. So the interior walls still have some indeterminacy.
So the good news is that because we've gotten the introduction of some new elements to this building, you all have an extra couple of weeks to work it out, because that triggers new public testimony.
This is Rola speaking. So there's nothing new in this plan.
I will disagree. Yes. I will disagree with you. There have been new materials and new aspects to this project that that have not been presented to the public before. And so what I'm going to do is open up this hearing for public testimony, unless there are other questions by the board at this time. No? Okay. Seeing none, I would like to open up this public hearing for members of the public to make a brief presentation on the presentation that has been made tonight, not on what has previously been made, because you will have already had your opportunity to make testimony on that, but what has been presented tonight. Please exercise the raised hand button. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing and open it up to members of the public that want to speak in opposition or otherwise express concern about this application. Once, going twice. Seeing none, what I'd like to do is, as the board intends to do is leave written record open until noon on the 15th and invite the applicant to come back on the 21st to hopefully have a more finalized plan on what they expect this to look like so that the board will feel more comfortable voting on the application that's going to be before us instead of something that I know at least Rob and I have a little bit of a concern on. We're not sure what this is going to be. We hope to see what it will be. So I don't know if you have any further aspects of your application that you'd like to present to us this evening, but I'm very happy with what we've seen. I know that there are some things that need to be worked out that at least one member of the board and myself as well feel like it would be beneficial to my vote to see a more final version of what you intend to have. So
Mr. Chair, this is Rola speaking. If I can we just clarify on plan, just to make it clear so that we can go back and see what needs to be updated. So Victor, if you can please flip back to the level 1 plan.
All right. My screen momentarily froze. So I have sort of a question. Is the level 1 plan?
Yeah, Victor, can you go in full screen, please?
Yes.
Right. So if we look at the lobby space, if Victor, you can point your arrow to the darker yellow. So that's where we're entering and going up that stair. And that is part of the lobby space so that the public can enter that space and go up to the lobby that is on the 2nd level and access the roof terrace. And then you see in green the market space. And that's the glass that you see there in plan. So the struggle there was, do we remove that glass and have that whole space open? But it wants to be a tenant space, so the glass needs to be there. So ultimately, I think that the direction there is that, mechanically it needs to be self-sufficient. So does the lobby, because a tenant wants to come in and rent that market or A space, and it needs to operate on its own. So there will be glazing that goes along that wall that you see in plan. Does that kind of respond to your question? That's what I wanted to kind of clarify. So you see how the stair is public, it goes up to the lobby, allows you to exit onto that terrace. And that open to below needs to be self-sufficient on its own, mechanically operating on its own for a tenant to come in and rent out that space since it's a shell space, right? And the rest can be public and accessible, so that you're able to get to the terrace.
So Rola, if I could, and Mr. Chair, just to try to clarify, I think what I'm interpreting is that there needs to be glass separating the stair, 2-story glass, such that the conditions that you see below in that rendering that I think everyone likes, you could have a bar there and it could be open, but above the stairs and connecting to the roof, there needs to be glass separating the 2 spaces. Is that correct, Rola?
Correct. This is the final plan. We don't plan to change this at all. So if we come back, you're going to see this plan. Because again, everything that's yellow and lobby needs to be self-sufficient, needs to be air conditioned on its own, and then the tenant space needs to be self-sufficient. So it can't really be open to the lobby. Otherwise, it doesn't operate on its own, and it would be hard to figure out leasing and tenanting that way.
That actually does clarify what I thought I had understood from the presentation earlier, that it was not finalized, it was still in flux. That actually does satisfy the concerns that I had a few minutes ago, that I wanted to give you some extra time to work out. But it sounds to me, based on what you just said, and I want to thank you for that, is that it has been worked out and you do have a final plan and that it's not going to be further modified. And you were describing the struggles that you had and make it work, and that you actually do have a plan for it. So
Correct, Mr. Chair. This is what is in our GMP drawings, and that is not going to change from here to 2-3 weeks from now. This is what works mechanically.
I really do. Because the way that it was presented, I think a few minutes ago, was that it could have changed and that you were still kind of trying to figure it out, and that is clearly no longer the case. This is the application that you've got, and this is the plan set that you've got. So I appreciate making sure that we are on the same page as to where you are in the process. So that does satisfy me. I don't know then if we need to continue this application. I think that you've addressed everybody's questions here on what we've had before and tonight, by certainly my questions, and I think Rob's as well, as to whether this is something that is not final. And it's pretty clear that, based on what you've just said, that this is in fact final. So I appreciate that. I think we do not actually need to leave the written record open, and this case is ripe for a vote this evening. So what I'd like to do, yes, Rob.
Oh, I thank you. I just wanted to say I appreciate how there's a lot of moving parts when submitting applications, but I believe this wall and these doors were on the iteration that we saw several weeks ago. So I'll just because you guys are going to be coming back before us probably in the future for other projects. It is a source of frustration to be shown images of things that are not actually going to come to fruition. And some of those are major and some of them are minor. But I do get cranky when, a board is shown imagery of exciting things that we like, only to be told later that that's not actually what's being proposed. So I will just say, last point on this, there are buildings in Boston that do have this openness between the lobby and some of the commercial space. And I understand this is a different building with a different layout and different square footage, and maybe it's not possible here. But I think that would have been a very exciting addition to this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, with no further questions or comments from the board, we have taken a look at the updated staff memorandum. We've taken public testimony now twice. We have discussed the considerations that were in staff memorandum that reflect what we're required to address in our vote. We have looked at the comprehensive plan and the policy plans and the standards established by the city, and identified in the as reflected in the staff memorandum that those are met. The intent of the zoning district is met. That mitigation has been shown by the applicant to alleviate the impacts attributable to the development. We've looked at the proposed conditions proposed by staff, and I don't know if the board has any additional proposed conditions that it would like to suggest. I have not heard any thus far. Okay, seeing none. Following public testimony and review of the submitted materials and deliberation of the required considerations outlined by the Somerville zoning ordinance, I move to approve with conditions the application for site plan approval for development of a lab building. Seconded by Rob. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Thank you all very much. We have a unanimous vote. Congratulations to the applicant.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your time and your comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck. With no further items on the agenda for the planning board, the chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Debbie. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
John votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Thank you all. See you all in a few weeks. Bye. Go
Night.
Sox.
Yep, go Sox.